One of the topics I still get the most questions about from ToneX users that are viewers of my channel is the difference between tone models and presets when utilizing ToneX. So I thought I would take the time today to do a quick video about this topic, but also showcase the kind of what I would call the default preset that I use after I create a tone model just to deliver a tone that's going to be a few steps closer to what I would call a mix ready or live ready preset. So let's dive right in and take a look at this topic. So one thing to keep in mind, there is no such thing as the perfect tone model or the perfect default template. It's really going to come down to the goals of the end user, what they're trying to accomplish, where they're trying to use a particular tone. Maybe we need a really big reverb and big delay for one tone, and then another tone requires almost no reverb or no delay. So there's never going to be a one size fits all. But what I want to show you here is starting off is, first of all, what a tone model is. So when a creator like myself or the folks at IK Multimedia create a tone model and offer it to a user, that raw tone model as capture would look something like this. There would be no noise gate engaged. You would have an amp and a cab, possibly, depending on the type of tone model it is. You could also just have amp only or direct tone models. In that case, there wouldn't be a cab. We would have to add something there ourselves. But for this example, I'm just going to use an amp and cab capture. Compressor would be turned off, modulation would be turned off, delay would be off, reverb would be off. And if we click our advanced tab, you'll notice that everything's kind of just centered out to the default position. Presence and depth over here are set to 5, volumes at 5. Treble frequency is usually set around 1,000, but the treble boost and cut is actually at 5, the mid is at 5, bass is at 5, and gain's at 5. That's going to represent how that tone model was captured by the capture creator. Any moves from there are going to move away from the original tone of the capture, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but also not necessarily a necessary thing to do, but we'll discuss that shortly. So basically, when you create a tone model, such as this particular tone model, I'm going to be using these tone models to demonstrate what we're talking about today. This is from my just released Zee-Mazterpiece Ultimate NDI collection, which is a really cool, concise set of captures based off of my absolutely beautiful and incredible Dr. Zee-Maz 18NR. I absolutely love this amp. It kind of holds a special place in my heart. I used this amp for many years for both sessions and playing live. So basically, if you listen to what this capture sounds like, I'm playing my beautiful Vigier Expert Strat style guitar. I'm on the middle position. Even as I switch positions around bridge, neck, go back to that middle position. We have a very nice tone there, but it's raw. It's exactly as it was captured. There's no reverb. There's no ambience on it. The volume may not be loud enough for some users. They may want to have a little more volume coming out of that, or any number of other things. So basically what I try to do is deliver my presets with this basic template. And we're not going to start by touching the EQ or advanced features. We'll talk about that a little later. First thing I do is I come up to the noise gate, kind of whether I feel it needs it or not. I like to add that in there. If we're completely honest, guitars can be noisy instruments, and the higher gain or more overdrive distortion we have on a particular tone model, it's just going to inherently have some noise to it. So I like to set the noise gate on, and then I always start off with the threshold around -75 or -70. Let's just go to -75 on this one, since it isn't really a super high gain tone. While it does have a bit of edge, I wouldn't consider that high gain at all. My release, I bring up somewhere around the 12 o'clock position, and the depth I leave there as well. So now we're basically going to cut out any extraneous noise we have without the possibility of really chopping off any of our note. And if you find that that's too much and it chops off too soon, we could always bring this down to a lower position. Now, some folks like to use that in post as well after the amp. And that's possible too, but I find for most situations I just leave it first. Other people may want to put it in post. The next thing I do is head straight over to the compressor, engage that, and I usually bring this threshold up around -10 for no other reason than The way I make my tone models, I usually get this just kissing the tone a little bit. You'll see the gain reduction meter just comes in slightly and might control any little peaks that I have. I'm not even so concerned if it's not even really doing much at all, because what I'm going to use this is as my final kind of output level control. I usually bring my attack down to fastest, and then I'll control the output volume of this tone model by bringing that gain control up or down to where I need it to be. And because this is in post, basically what's going to happen is this is going to act as our final output volume. When you put your compressor in post, if you use your main model volume here, if I crank this up, you're going to notice that's going to add a lot more gain reduction. Because what's happening now is I'm taking the amp model and I'm feeding more signal into the front of the compressor, so it's going to compress more. So basically, if you have your compressor in pre, you can use your model volume to control your final output. But if you have your compressor in post, you're going to want to use your compressor's gain knob so that we don't actually affect the tone of the tone model, just more the output level. So basically, those are my sort of starting points on the compression. Now I head straight over to my reverb, and I really kind of like the room reverb, but I don't like too much of it. I bring this down to around 3, pre-delay up to 10 or maybe 20. I usually like to leave the color right up the center, and my mix I leave around 30%. And basically you can hear from this, if I go in and turn everything off, here's what we started with. Nothing wrong with that. Get a little more volume, tiny dab of compression, noise gate, and some reverb. And we have something that's a little bit more elevated. Now, what I need to do with that is then save that as a preset. So I would have to come in here and make sure that I actually go through the steps of saving that as a preset. Then I end up over here on my preset model. I kind of have this off screen right now, but up in this top corner of our normal ToneX interface, we have a preset tab and a tone model tab. So if I come over to here, you can see now that I've saved these as presets, and they already have these settings built into them. So basically now coming over to a delay, if I was to throw delay on there, I really gravitate towards the tape delay we have set to the normal setting. I always hit that sync, set to usually around a quarter note, and leave the mix and feedback where they are by default. And we have a beautiful tone there with some nice coloration to it. Now, if we were to take that and go to our advanced controls here, what's going to happen is when I create a tone model, for instance, I really try to dial it in so that it works with various guitars. And you'll see that in a lot of my videos. I'll always showcase it, try to showcase with single coils, humbuckers, maybe some P90s, and show that, man, this is a really good starting point regardless of the guitar that we're playing. But everybody's monitoring system is very different, and you really can't account for how people are monitoring, whether it be the room they're in or the monitoring system they're using. So one thing that is very useful for an end user is if they do get a tone model that maybe they hear in one of my videos, they go, man, on my system it sounds too bright or too dark. That's not necessarily a problem with the tone model, but maybe it's a problem with their monitoring system. So there are ways to deal with this. And a lot of people think that it's a faux pas, or that we shouldn't be using the EQ controls on the tone model since it's not acting like the real tone controls of the amplifier. But nothing could be further from the truth. This is is a great, especially set in post, way to be able to tweak these tones. If we set this to pre, anything we change here will affect what's hitting the front of the tone model, and therefore it may saturate more or saturate less that tone model. So I always keep mine in post so it's happening after the tone model. A tone has already been created. So here we are, just as this tone was captured. But let's say somebody says, I want it to be a little less thick and maybe a little bit more brilliance to it. My favorite controls to go to are the depth and presence. So let's do this. Let's go down to 3.5 on depth and up to, let's say, 7.5 on presence as a starting point. You'll hear that there's a little bit more cut with a little less bottom. What about the opposite? What if we want more depth and less presence? Kind of thin it out a bit. You can hear now that it's much darker. 90% of the time when I need to tweak a tone model for a particular room or monitoring system, I can get what I need just by using the presence and depth. Of course, we do have a bass shelf EQ, treble shelf EQ, so basically a low shelf and a high shelf, and then a parametric bell EQ for the center frequencies. We can pick the frequency, we can pick the Q, and we can boost or cut that. But more often than not, I don't really need to touch this. Now, also the gain control. The gain control, as we've talked about many times, is just doing the exact same thing as the global input trim. Some people will tell you that it isn't, but that's just not correct. This is just doing the same as the global input trim. Keep something in mind on your ToneX pedal. The global input trim is after the A to D conversion. So it's not helping with your signal to noise ratio or anything along those lines. It's simply hitting the front of the tone model with more digital gain, just like this control. So if we had this particular tone model, and we want it to be a little less saturated, we can take this and move it down. And that cleans things up. Or maybe we want it to be more saturated. Or maybe we want it just like it was when it was created. There you have it. That's a few ways you can tweak the overall tonal qualities of your tone model. So that's what I basically do as far as setting up a default sort of preset for my tone models. And obviously this is not carved in stone. This is to get people started. So when they load it in, it's going to have a generally nice polished sound to it. And they can tweak from there for their particular needs and use cases that they're going to be using these tone models for. So I hope that that was somewhat helpful and answers the question of the difference between a tone model and a preset, and also what we can do with some of the tools we have in ToneX. Today I'm going to leave you with the full-blown demo video for this Zee-Mazterpiece Ultimate and DI collection. I love these tones. They worked really nice in the mix. I hope you like them in the mix as well. If you're so inclined, there is a link below in the description where you can grab these tone models, and I hope you enjoy playing them as much as I do and as much as I enjoyed making them as well. Thanks again so much for tuning in. Please like the video, share it with anybody you think would get some use or enjoyment out of watching it. Also, please subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I'll be back really soon with some more. Again, the links are below for these tone models, and I hope you enjoy the music on the way out. Ciao for now.